Thank you so much for joining us here on the We Don't Play podcast show. How are you, ladies?
Good.
Doing well.
That's good. That's good. It's so
Thank you
good.
for asking.
Yeah, anytime, anytime. This is such an amazing moment, and celebrating Mother's Day weekend, celebrating a new month, celebrating just life in general is a blessing, and at the same time, it's good to reflect on some things. So I'm really excited that we're here today to really talk deep and discuss about matters that really involve us people and just give us a better perspective to look at things differently so we can have a better perspective for the next generation. So it would be great to hear from you and just let us know who you are and what you do and what is the goal. What have you been seeing so far?
So I guess I'll start. My name is Ceiba First Lady Chavez. I am the president and founder of the PR and Arts Agency. We're really focused on resetting ethics, standards, morals, character, integrity back to public relations and media, consciously and sustainably with brands, businesses, and artistry. And with that being said, I also art curate with Fridge Art Fair. I partnered with them 3 years ago in Miami when I took over our event down there in the same space. So they are a non-for-profit art fair that shows both in New York and Miami for Art Basel, and then New York for Freeze Art Week. They give opportunity to artists and to exhibit through donations, where most of the spaces and exhibition spaces start at 1,500 into the hundred thousands of dollars. We give artists that opportunity internationally and nationally to show their work and exhibit for $200, $500 donations. And as you know, non-for-profits is also tax deductible, and so they do get that right off as well, which is a blessing and an honor to show so many different people. We're coming upon both of our 10-year anniversary in Miami for Art Basel this year in December. Um, and then this is my second year exhibiting in New York with them as their director and curator, with Eric Ginsberg, who is their founding director. Um, it's great. We have three galleries, two on the Lower East Side, 128 Gallery and 2B2C Gallery. And then in Brooklyn, Two Boots Pizza and a showroom that will be hosting us. So we expect to show about 58 artists. But my biggest thing is doing interactive art events around sustainability and consciousness. So where in Miami I do, maybe 3, 4 panels a day and interactive experiences within the art galleries. Here in New York, I am just focusing all of my attention on the start to our tour, which is along with Mothers Against Gun Violence and GunMark. And this is a really big one for us because I don't know if you know Favor, but and the fans that are listening today and listeners, thank you for being here. But to date, there has been more shootings than there have days in the years in 2023. Miss Debra has those statistics and numbers to the point to right now that she can share with us. But what we consider this as a senior celebrity publicist, what I consider this and what my cohorts consider this is a state of emergency. And so this is what it is. It's an urgent call. So the divine alignment of meeting Miss Debra and Mothers Against Gun Violence in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and what they've done with mural and memorial bus stops, also the art therapy work that they've done. That's what we're going to be bringing to New York so that people can see it in real time. Also, we'll be sharing an 8-minute movie about the art therapy that her and Dr. Raul have done with victims and their families, and the memorial art commemorating our loved ones and now ancestors. And so we're going to marry that along with the soundtrack, which is called Code Blue, that Miss Sarah Fierek is graciously giving us part of the proceeds of the sales donations back to Mothers Against Gun Violence as well as GunMark. And she'll be releasing her new single Code Blue there in New York with us live. And then we have, Miss Sephida Artis-Mills, my sister and advocate, who we have had the blessed alignment since Super Bowl to really start working together on advocacy and all the things that we're doing. We have more projects in this, but when she brought to me GunMark, my heart just was full. And I'm like, wow, this sister is a co-founder of a solution-based technology that can literally change our world right now. And see, my focus favorite is finding, let's not just talk about it. Let's not just, advocate about it, but let's find the solution and then implement the solution. And so this is what this technology brings to us, something that we can actually stand behind, bipartisan, and all agree this is something that is needed and can be implemented immediately with the right funding behind it. And so, again, we're going to keep bringing those solutions as I continue to work on the 17 UN Sustainable Goals. And so it's an honor and a blessing to be here. And much honor and respect to our mother in the space here, Miss Debra Gillispie, and all the work that she's done up until this point. In legislation, in working and bringing our politicians aboard. Senator Baldwin has signed on to this. We're working with the Violence Prevention Office and the Mayor's Office in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So we're going to get ready to take these stories and these beautiful ancestors with us and tell the story so that the nervous system can hear and understand this these stories, this tragedy, which it might be normally very triggering, but with the soundtrack of music behind it and then a solution married into that in an interactive art experience. I consider this something like STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and music. And so this is that interactive experience so that when the people leave, they are solution-based and action-based. And that is my hope with the Code Blue Art Exhibition, May 18th at 7 p.m. in New York, and you'll get more information to follow. Thank you so much for having us.
Wow. Thank you so much for breaking this down. This is so helpful because it also gets people to see how important this is. When you think about numbers, you don't play with numbers because you are actually thinking about the intricate effect that it causes, long term when you think about the psychology of how things work. And right now we're at that point where we're trying to numb that, but at the same time actualize it so we can be better and have less numbers, almost to zero, which is possible. And it happens in other countries, it happens in the world. It's not a new thing. So I'm so happy that this is something that needs to come to light so it's not considered as a norm, which should not be. And it creates more experiences for people to enjoy with their loved ones, which is the main goal of us being here together. So I would love to know, if we could break down what GunMark is for people who want to have an insight. Could we get some insight on that?
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely an honor to be here in any space where I have the opportunity to explain what GunMark is and to also touch on why it's very, very personal for me. As stated before, I am an indirect victim of gun violence, and I think just emphasizing that is important because of the people who are left behind when they lose their loved ones that have to deal with the lifelong grief. This is not there's no specific time frame and no right or wrong process when it comes to grieving. And it could be any moment or any particular situation that will pull you right back into that situation, and where you may randomly cry, you may randomly get angry or frustrated because you may not have closure. I was one of those children who did not get closure, and I lost my father at a really young age. About 12 or 13 I was, and my father's killers were never brought to justice. And then in the height of the COVID pandemic, I lost my 24-year-old cousin that I watched grow up from the time he was born. So for me, it's definitely a state of emergency, but it's unacceptable, and it should not be normal. this should not be normal for us, especially for those of us who have children that go to school. The last thing on a child's mind should be the possibility of dying in a classroom. And that really hits really heavily for me. And I just could not imagine what it's like to be a mother losing a child tragically, especially when you sent them to school, which is supposed to be a safe space. So for GunMark technology, it is not only about accountability and responsibility as a gun owner, it is most specifically in looking at ways that these instances can be prevented. Imagine being able to, for a school to get a warning or an alert that there is a firearm within an area or vicinity of the school that could possibly turn into an active shooter situation, and they're able to lock down the school prior to that active shooter gaining access to that building. And that was one of the things that we focused on in having IoT sensors, which would be embedded into a firearm, which would begin at the manufacturing process, so that these firearms are traceable, that they can track them all over the country, all over the world, just depending on however we're able to get this implemented and becoming a standard, which we would of course want it to become a standard here in the United States, but this should be something that should be done globally, because we see so many times where if someone loses their life due to gun violence, if that murder weapon is not found, then usually the case can never be resolved. There's one thing. Then you have schools, government buildings, churches, shopping centers, grocery stores, where these mass shootings have occurred. And imagine how many lives would have been saved if they knew that that person was coming, or if they knew ahead of time that there was a firearm that was in the area, that they're able to at least alert authorities to where they're readily available to alleviate that situation. There's so many different factors that can go into the how to prevent these situations. So I'm a firm believer in using technology for good. I understand people have issues with privacy and being tracked, but I always say if you have a cell phone, you're being tracked anyway. Every conversation you have, everything is being recorded. And even just walking around every day in society, there's cameras everywhere that people aren't even aware are there, but they're watching, they're recording information, they're recording conversations. So it's not just about trying to help people become more comfortable with why this type of technology is necessary, but it's not to invade people's privacy. In fact, because it is blockchain based, it is a lot less invasive, but making sure that the people that need to know the information, the people that need to know who owns these firearms, who's responsible in the event that this firearm is used unlawfully, which also helps gun owners in the event that their firearm may be stolen. If they're able to report that immediately and their firearm is used in the commission of a crime, now that alleviates them from being responsible for what took place with their firearms. So there's so many different things that we thought of in prevention, in protecting gun owners, and into promoting responsibility when it comes to being a gun owner, and that it is a privilege and it is not something that should be given to anyone, and that there are certain, as someone had previously said earlier today, there's certain classification of firearms that should not be on the street at all. So there's a lot to discuss, there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot that can continue to be added and built into the technology so that we can make society safer, most specifically, for our children, because if they are our future and we're losing them in this manner, how much of a future can we look forward to for our kids if we can't even send them to school without being afraid that they may not come home?
This is heavy. This is heavy. It's like I'm thinking about so many things right now, especially when you mention technology, because that's what we're using now. When you think about apps, we have things like Amber Alerts, but they should be more than that. So I'm thinking about it's already available, and how can we make that readily available for people who need them, based on data, based on history, based on track records, based on things. Because when you hear about these things, they are planned. So if you can cut the plan, or just cease and desist the plan, there's a solution to this, and I know that it's not far from reach as well. So what would be the first thing you would tell someone who is thinking about all these things we're talking about? How can they process this, and what should they do next?
Um, I mean, it's really no easy way to tell someone how to process it. I think that we have to understand that there's not a one size fits all type of solution. That you have to break things down and compartmentalize them in a way, and how to address each of the things, including getting to the root causes of these things. There's so much. It's a very deep and very heavy conversation, because we're talking about so many factors that go into this, including mental health. As this is Mental Health Awareness Month, there's a lot of people with mental health issues. In some cases, they have found that people who have committed these crimes did have mental health issues. That's not always the case, but because that is something that does happen, how do we handle mental health? And in this country, mental health is not handled in a way that is solutionary, in a way to where people are really getting the help that is needed. We're talking about people who are constantly victimized and traumatized by their environment, that can ultimately grow up and emulate the very things that they have seen and experienced. We're talking about children that are being exposed to things that, as their brain is developing, they're experiencing an excessive amount of trauma. And they're constantly seeing these things replayed over and over again. That can impact someone mentally. It doesn't stop it being something that is genetic. It is environmental factors that can cause a mental breakdown. A normal, everyday person that's never experienced something like that can suddenly have a mental breakdown, because of the things that they're constantly bombarded with, the stress that people are experiencing because of what's happening economically. These are things that are a recipe for disaster when they're not addressed, and when people don't have an outlet, when people don't have safe spaces, when there isn't, healing that is cultivated in how we address what's happening in society. So, technology is something that, when explained correctly, and when giving people a better understanding of how this could be utilized for so many reasons and to do so much good than harm, then it'll help people to be more receptive of why there is a need for tracking and tracing in certain aspects, but still also respecting people's privacy, and not to misuse or abuse access to that kind of information. And that's something that we definitely had talked about, and that we don't want to do. We want people to feel safe, and we want people to know that there's information that could be submitted anonymously, to where it's not necessarily exposing the person that's reporting information, and that will definitely save people's lives. So it's a lot to process, but I think we should always be willing to have the hard conversation that we don't always want to have. But that's the beginning of understanding, and beginning of coming up with a solution that can make people feel more comfortable, because it's not technology in and of itself that is evil. Anything can be used for evil depending on the person that's using it. Any tool, it doesn't matter what it is. So I want people to understand more that there's so much more good that can be done, and things that can be created to help us and to help our society, and to make things better for each other and for our children, and get back to communities, being that village, because that's missing. And we want to help be, a catalyst for that change, and to cultivate that kind of unity within the community, to be able to report things, to be able to not be afraid to say, this is not happening in my neighborhood. I'm not going to continue to watch this happen and do nothing about it. So that's what I would encourage people to do when they are processing these things, to figure out in a way that is best comfortable for them, to get involved, and to figure out ways to help, even if it just means sharing it with someone that could potentially help such a worthy cause.
Thank you so much for that. That's very helpful. I think it also opens up a lot of conversation within themselves to start asking questions that mean the most to them so they can make better decisions. Because when you think about mental health, it's those processes. It's what you're telling yourself. It's like, I can do this, I can do this, and then you do it. But if you tell yourself the opposite, then that snowballs. So it's very important to look at that. I'm now thinking about the mental health in regards to like sound and music. you know, when I now think about that as therapy, I love to hear, from anyone, Sarah, Sephida, Ceiba, or Debra. When I think about the song now, specifically, what is that emotional factor you want people to get out of the song that's going to give them that, lyrics wise, energy wise, all wise? What would that be?
Thank you, Favor. So for Code Blue, I think one big thing for me is always finding a way to use my voice for good and finding a way to unite people through music and to elevate causes, whether it be a nonprofit or a movement. And that was something that I wanted to do as a young girl too. I found a letter I wrote when I was 10 that talked about how I wanted to use my voice to help the homeless and help people that needed assistance or a cause. And being an artist and using your voice in a powerful way to help unite people, I think, is really important. This specific song it's a grief song. It's a loss song. It's about abandonment. It's about still feeling someone's energy that you may have lost within you. And while it is a heavier emotional song, it also is a hopeful song. It's meant to remind people of the power of uniting around grief. And I feel like in a society similar to mental health issues, oftentimes grief isn't talked about enough. As we're going through navigating this epidemic of gun violence, oftentimes it gets politicized first before we look at the human side of it. And having met people like Debra and Sephida who have lived through loss and have lost loved ones, and knowing that if we use our voice and we unite around that, we need to remind people that there are real emotions tied to these issues. And I feel like it's so important to allow ourselves to process those emotions. One thing I feel about grief is it's sort of like all the emotions wrapped in one. So it's like all the colors of emotions. And the more we can talk about those situations, the more we can unite around the need for change in policy and the need to unite political parties and look at this as a nonpartisan issue and more as a human issue, that's where we'll make real change. So, when I had met Debra many years ago and heard her moving story about the start of Mothers Against Gun Violence and how it stemmed from losing her son, and to know the strength that took to create a movement around her grief and to help other survivors. I think my vision for this song and the emotions, you can't really dictate what emotions will come from listening to a song, right? It's meant to flow into you. I wrote a quote that was, "Art is perception, you get what you need." So I'm hoping this song provides to the listeners what they need in that moment, whether it's to feel that loved one that's moved on, whether it's to empathize more of the human issue, whether it's to understand that there are real people grieving the loss of their fathers and their children and their sons and their loved ones, and that there is things we can do to help make this movement and bring solutions to it, like with what Sephida is working on. And it's just, I think music is a powerful way to unite people, and I'm hoping that it reminds people of the human impact of gun violence and reminds us of the power of uniting around issues like this and working towards solutions.
I'm excited. Thank you so much for that. Go ahead.
I sent you the song, Favor, because as this will be put out on Monday, that's the day that we're playing Code Blue. So you can go ahead and play the song, or I can play it either now or at the end.
Okay. I've heard it, and already I can't wait for them to hear it. Let me just put it like that, because I feel like it's going to really put them in that state of thinking, because every lyric has a meaning, and that meaning has an emotion. So it's not just about going through the song, it's about going through the moment and also taking in those moments to really come out better, see how we can make the world a better place, and reduce all this so that we can have what it means to have, families, friends, loved ones. And that's the goal. The goal is to be a better place, because iron sharpens iron. If I can't sharpen myself, I need someone to help me. That's why we have accountability partners. So that's why it's so important for us to be together. And in this unity we're creating for people to also experience is where that growth, that mindset comes in. Because if you, like they say, if you see something, say something. Because we all have something to say, and we all have something to do as part of, the human race. So I really appreciate that. One question I wanted to ask about the event is, as people are going to the event and they are ready for the event, they're getting ready for it, what should they prepare as far as coming so they don't leave anything behind? What would that thing be?
I mean, just come as they are, with an open heart, ready to receive and surrender, and be ready to implement a solution through helping with donations, helping with sponsorships, helping with signing our petition at change.org, and continuing to do the work and advocacy work until we bring the solution. I think if we really unify together, things can be done overnight. I don't think that we have to wait and be drawn out 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. No. Right. But by fall, our hope is with the tour, this is just the first exhibition, and then we'll add on the play in Washington, D.C. But, we're going to bring the solution as well as the awareness, the storytelling, the truth telling, the art, so that it can help impact their soul. And then with the music as a soundtrack, it's interactive. So this is what I consider, basically, if you are absorbing everything around you and you're inspired by everything around you, if I can put you in a room with that's energy. Everything is energy. We all know that. And so just that energy alone is going to be felt through the hearts and the souls. So I'm just asking that you come with your, just as you are, and we'll take care of the nervous system from there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And for those also trying to find the link as well, it's in the show notes, in the description. Just tap on the links and you get all the access links to make sure that you're available. And staying in touch is also a big thing. I also believe in, even after the event is over, there's that accountability, I mentioned, and that allows people to still come back and give you feedback, which is very important, because life can be busy. The world is a busy place, and if we don't check on each other, we might miss those little signals. So I appreciate this, and I definitely look forward to hearing more good news about what has brought to the community long term for the benefit of our children and children's children. So Debra, I would love to hear you, any thoughts, anything you'd like to say, and then we'll go to Ceiba.
Sure. I really liked what Ceiba just said, that, there may be some preconceptions of what is gun violence. However, gun violence isn't a black and brown issue, it's a people issue. And until we realize that my problem is your problem and your problem is my problem, we won't solve the issues of gun violence. But with something so magnificent and God sent as GunMark, I don't see that there's any more excuses. We were looking at these statistics, and they're current to May 13th. We've lost over 15,000 people to gun violence in America. That should be unacceptable. But the fact that the majority of them are minorities, it's okay. But how can that be okay when we are the highest people putting into our national income. I mean, we're talking over $31 trillion. And yet, that shouldn't be okay. So we do need to act. We do need to come together and say enough is enough. I love what Sarah said. Sarah said that our collective grief needs to be louder than gun violence. Amen to that. Sarah's right, it does. And the fact that the government, we're already charging gun manufacturers for guns, all their sales, it's either 10% for handguns or 11% for long guns and all ammunition and ancillary products. That's over $4.6 billion they collected in 2022. We're only asking for what, 1-2% to fund GunMark and put an end, offer a solution to gun violence in America. I think that's a good investment.
100%. And it's doable. It can be done. So it goes back
It can be done.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, the government, I mean, I should ask, make a choice. You can give us 1-2% of the existing 31.6 billion, or you can raise it 1%, 2%, and still fund gun. Because right now, the total, as I said, it comes out to, they average it for 8 with the 10, 11%. That's how much they grossed of all total sales. That's a lot of money, you guys. With 41.6 billion, that's a lot of money.
It is. And I just wanted to quickly add to that, to what Ms. Debra is saying, that there are people out there that have a solution to something that we've been trying hard to find solutions for, aside from what we've done with GunMark, that it's because of the lack of capital and funding and even exposure to bring these things to market. So imagine if the government and both state and federal government were to get involved to allocate a percentage of tax revenue to fund these types of solutions and these entrepreneurs and technologies and different things that people are creating to solve a problem, especially a problem as big as gun violence, problems as big as homelessness, just all the things in society that need a solution, that somewhere somebody is sitting there with a solution, but they can't bring it to market because of the lack of resources that is needed in order to do it. So we're not asking for a lot, but this is something that you don't want to wait until it happens to you. You don't want to wait and say, I'll care when it hits close to home. You don't want it to hit close to home, trust me. It's not something you want to relate to. It's not something you want to say that you've experienced. And both myself and Ms. Debra can tell you that is something that we don't wish on anybody. So it's better to be a part of a solution and to create what these standards are, because we, the people of this country, have more power than we realize. And when we unite and come together, we can express and exercise that power. We can hold elected officials accountable to the things that they promise. You are put in a position of power to serve in whatever district, whatever state, city, or municipality in which you are in. And if you are not serving the people, what is your purpose in being in that seat? Give that seat to someone who is going to serve a purpose and who is going to serve the people and better their communities. What is the point in being in a community that you're not there to improve and make circumstances better for the people and make it a community that's able to thrive and sustain itself, economically, people themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually? People need to be able to thrive and have a better quality of life than being in a society where we have to be concerned about things that should be the furthest thing from our minds, especially as a parent and especially with children and their innocence being robbed of them because of the things that they are constantly exposed to that they shouldn't even be aware of. But here we are. So I totally agree with Miss Debra, and I'm always thankful and grateful to her for this work, because I know it has to be gut-wrenching to constantly relive and have to speak about your loss as you're continuing to grieve through the process. So I'm always going to admire and just love on her as much as possible, because it takes a lot for her to do what she does. And she's done a lot, and she has not stopped. And she could have been that person that said, this is too much for me. I'm just going to continue to personally grieve, and I'm not going to put myself out there, knowing how many people that she's impacting and that she's helping from this. Understand every mother, every sister, every brother, every person that is an indirect victim of this. You are amplifying their voices. When you come and you support this kind of work, you're telling people not only that you're here, but I stand with you, I stand behind you. And so this is not something that stops in New York. We're going to continue to keep going until we can reach that solution, because we have to be that catalyst for change if we want a better future for our children and ourselves, because it is absolutely necessary. This is not optional.
Amen. She's right. And I just want to change that from 8% that I mentioned, that it was an 84% increase in the taxes that the federal government was receiving in gun sales and the ancillary products. So, correction.
Wow.
And I think, Ms. Debra, you mentioned earlier that as of those statistics of May 13th, we've lost 6,000 of our babies to gun violence within those 15,000.
Yes.
Yes, so that's up to date in 2023. Those are brand new statistics, and they shouldn't be a statistic at all.
No way.
Yeah, we lost specifically up until May 13th, 2023, 6,642 children to gun violence.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
It's really up to us. Thank you so much, Ms. Debra, for that. Sephida, Ceiba, Sarah. This is it's a state of emergency. It's more than a state of emergency. This is a top of the list priority, because this affects everything. It affects the economy. It affects every single piece. You can't detach this from anything. It's all inclined. And this is where I believe, as you're listening to this episode, please, as you're listening to this episode, make sure that before you finish listening to this episode, click on the link and make your donation. Act now, because life happens. If you can listen to this episode actively and make that contribution, you have done your part. You have done your part, and God will reward you for that part you have done. So that's just a call from us to make sure that you're not just listening, you are acting. And as you're acting, you will see the benefits of your action, because you paid that forward. So I really appreciate you being here, and definitely looking forward to good news and better news and a better world for us and our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, because we need them. So I really appreciate you all for being here with us today, and I'm excited for the event, and just be there. If you're in New York, be there. Be there or be square.
Yeah.
Make sure you're there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and I look forward to, seeing you soon, God willing, and thank you so much for being with us here today on the We Don't Play podcast show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime.
saw a storm.